Welcome to the COVI Way, the podcast where we break down the intersection of people and technology. Because IT shouldn't just be about fixing problems. It's about enabling people to do their best work. I'm Cody Lentz, the VP of Sales at COVI, and today I'm speaking with Jesse Hile, Executive and Business Leadership Coach at Next Level Guidance. Over the past 15 years, Jesse has been in the trenches with high-growth startups, established nonprofits, and even a nearly 50-year-old family business. He's seen the full spectrum, spectacular successes and painful failures. Well, Jesse, thanks for jumping in today. I know you're up in Detroit. How was your drive?
It was good. It was good. It was a little long, but wasn't too bad. Made the most of it.
Did you start the day with coffee?
Water.
Water?
Yes.
Are you an anti-caffeiner?
Not anti-caffeiner. So I used to have a heart condition. I still have it called SVT, but through a lot of my journey and everything, I've not had any issues the past 2 years, which has been a miracle. But basically, SVT, caffeine can trigger it. So in 97, during a basketball game, shooting game-winning free throws, my heart went up to like 270, went to emergency room. Back then, doctors couldn't figure out really what it was because they couldn't identify it in time before I got to the hospital, what it was. And they just said, stay off of caffeine. So I never had caffeine since, except my chocolate chip cookies. I'll have those every once in a while. But been a water guy.
Oh, I mean, obviously that's healthy. Enlighten me on how much caffeine there is in a chocolate chip cookie.
You know, I've never honestly looked into it, but I think it's minimal.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
I am not a huge chocolate chip cookie fan, but I'm assuming that extrapolates to oatmeal raisin, which would be my downfall.
Oh, so, another good
thanks for jumping in. I know that, you and I have worked on a few different things together. You've helped out COVI a few different times with things here in the recent past. I just wanted to bring you on to talk about the framework that you use and your journey to get where you are today with your executive coaching engagements. And I know that the main framework you use, you call GAME. And I just wanted to get the story behind the beginning, the middle, and when you landed on the framework and how you use it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's fun. I've never been asked that and brought into it this way, but it really has developed over the past 20 years. So I credit it all back to my senior project. I started this happiness tracking back in 2005. Basically, there were like 4 pillars of personal, professional, financial, spiritual, community that I would measure and gauge monthly. And it actually went on the past 20 years. I still do it to this day. But what was interesting was in 2006, I never was the one to really believe in depression, but it really hit me like a ton of bricks and severely depressed. And, it caused anxiety and panic attacks and everything else to where, I almost jumped off a parking garage. And, it was interesting to see over the years. I think it was a few years ago, I sat down and I was like, man, I'm curious to what this happiness tracking that I've been tracking each month. Like I would measure it on a scale of 0 to 10 and keep track each month of which one, like if it was a 3 out of a 10, I'd make a little note why. And a few years ago, I was like, this would be cool to see on a bar graph. And on this, chart that I saw, I could see the ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And the valleys I could really identify and then correlate back to, well, that was when I was, high anxiety or panic attacks, or this was when I was severely depressed. And over the years in analyzing that and moving forward, it's really helped me mitigate, being stuck in my default mode of how I used to be or how I used to get in these ruts and stuff. So, I'd say 3 years ago, I hired my own executive coach, Daryl Sweeney, and he's been working with Ankush Jain and Steve Hardison Group and all these world-class coaches, just like top coaches in the world. And their philosophy in coaching has really, one, attributed to what I mentioned earlier with my heart condition, SVT, this powerful movement of being and my document process that's really eliminated any heart, like I haven't had any heart issues the past few years, and it's been incredible because it's sort of like the hiccups, right? Like you have those, then they go away, and it's like saying they can come back. Like, where is it? Where'd it go? And definitely not discrediting like medicine or therapy or counseling. Those are all much needed resources. But it's amazing not to have to rely on those and be in total peace, calm, and clarity and focus. And so, I created this framework of game of gratitude, attitude, mindset, and empathy, just because of all of my past 20 years of experiences through nonprofit organizations, high growth startups, early stage startups. I've seen all the good, bad, and the ugly of them all, and the toxic cultures, good cultures, and bits and pieces of it. But that's sort of how I've come to it, and I'm excited, to be at this point to where I can really start to implement this in with organizations.
No, that's awesome. I think your senior project helped you establish a baseline, and then you diligently kept tracking the data that allowed you to basically be a data analyst for your psychology, which is it's a very interesting and somewhat serendipitous or lucky circumstance you fell into there. Not the heart condition part of that, obviously, but you said the last 2 years or so you haven't had any type of irregularities.
Correct. Yeah, it's been incredible. Like it's just I don't know, just an illumination feeling. It's really good.
Yeah, you think that's because basically your peace of mind or balance or whatever trendy catchphrase you want to throw on it?
Yeah. So there's this book written by Amy Hardison, Steve's wife, called The Ultimate Coach. And he touches base on this My Document that he does and has done with his clients. And, my coach, Daryl, brought me through that process. And I single-handedly handed to that to where, I was deep dive coaching individual that I did with him. But it's really a declaration of who you're being in this world. And who you declare yourself to be, and really living to that. And it's sort of almost like reprogramming your mind. From 0 to 18, you learn all these skills and habits, and it sort of becomes your default mode. And you're like, well, I'm always like this or like that. But, shifting your language, shifting the words literally coming out of your mouth, and declaring actually who do you need to be to create the life moving forward. I have it printed up on my desk, and I read it every morning just to sort of self-reboot and really stick to it. And so it's really has created that peace, that clarity, just each and every day. Am I perfect at it yet? No, but I strive to be each and every day. So
yeah, that's awesome. Can you extrapolate that into the professional space with an example or someone you're working with now, and how you're able to implement game?
Yeah, I mean, I would say literally in real time how I used to be and how I used to respond if something would frustrate me or tick me off, or you get in those situations, right? It's not going your way, and you just get short-fused, short-tempered. And this has allowed me in real time to identify in those situations now to respond a lot differently, and respond differently with the language that I'm using. More so, not coming from a place of fear. So, whenever you get those anxiety or there's stress or anger or short fused, you're coming from a fear base, right? You're like, oh, this isn't going the way, we're going to be behind, we're losing time, we're losing money, all this stuff. And you respond from a fear-based mentality. Mm-hmm. And that's what causes, misunderstandings or these frustrations that you have. And more so approach it now in real time of coming from a place of love. And when you do that, and, it doesn't mean like all flowers and everything's perfect and everything, but when you approach it differently from a place of love at all times in those situations, it can alleviate so many different misunderstandings and outcomes, and you can literally control the environments that you have and create a lot less of a toxic environment in those situations, and get a lot more productivity from it. And also, you especially for leaders, you reduce the risk of, making that employee feel on tension and ease and getting burned out and quitting, and improving your retention rates. And there's a lot of other positive side effects from that. So
the framework is basically like a culture tool, but it's also at like each different level of the organization. It's not just it's holistic, but it's also almost departmentalized and individual all in one framework.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The most important thing, though, as most people know, I mean, it stems from the CEO or the leader of the organization. Like they have to be bought into this. They have to go through it and live and breathe and sleep it as well. Otherwise, you're just creating a band-aid, a temporary band-aid, for the time being. But if all leadership is bought in and they're doing it, it goes all the way down to um, every single individual employee.
So what happens if like one or multiple elements of game aren't there?
And that's a great question. So I can say I've never seen any organization execute fully on all four yet. I'm sure there's many organizations out there that I'd love to work with and love to work with me that could, start to instill this. Collectively, I've seen organizations, do and excel really well on each of those factors, and each of those attributes. But if you got all four in sync, I mean, the ROI on it alone will be night and day difference of, where you're currently sitting right now as an organization.
I'm going to do some algebra with game, if that's okay, and ask like, what if an organization excels at empathy and excels at gratitude, but attitude and mindset are, less than or subpar?
It's funny you started with those two. I feel that the two most important ones are the gratitude and empathy. People confuse, I think, gratitude and empathy a lot and just think it's soft skills or what have you. But those two, by default, make the attitudes and mindsets where they need to be. And I think they're the single most two important factors of any organization to have. Because especially starting with the self, it starts with you, and grows from there. And so, if you have those two, what that also creates is another practice to go along with the gratitude aspect of it is acknowledging, powerfully acknowledging each and every person for their work, and really getting good of not just like, hey, you're doing a great job, like really being thoughtful about how you're acknowledging it and being very thankful for, because when you look at it, and I've been very fortunate to work with some incredible innovators, incredible leaders, who've done amazing things, and they all very much have a similar if you're familiar with the predictive index, similar to DISC or Myers-Briggs, a lot of CEOs I've noticed have a very high A and low D, very not my way or the highway, but very visionary, and out there and very, unstructured and just like, we got to get this done. They're very driven, and not every single employee is going to have that exact same profile, and so sometimes that gets lost or forgotten. But if everyone can get aligned on the gratitude and empathy side of things, that's one thing, common denominator that could really start to see those improvements or see those gaps within your organization come together.
Gotcha. It was kind of funny that I picked the two that you would prioritize. I'm sure I have a question in my interview notes that is like, what's the most important one? We'll see when I get there. I don't usually over structure these conversations.
Oh, no, sure.
What if we flipped it? So what does an organization look like? Well, let me ask this question first. You had alluded to this in what you just said, and I would love to just dive a little deeper into it. And can you give me an example of developed an intentional gratitude versus like duty bound and less impactful gratitude? Because you made it clear that you have like, this has to be a true state, it has to be authentic. And I think it'd be really beneficial for the leaders that jump in and see these clips of this on LinkedIn or see these on our podcast channel, that to know like, hey, this is what authenticity looks like. And this is some red flags on when it's kind of being forced.
Yeah. And, forced may be a harsh word. I think people are genuine, and especially, your leaders that are moving 1,000,000 miles an hour and have their hands in a lot of things and overseeing a lot of things to where it's like, hey, great job, well done, and stuff like that. That's still heartfelt. But I think going a little above and beyond, and maybe, practice, I challenge you to practice it today with someone, and really pointing out and starting with, hey, Cody, I want to acknowledge you, for setting this up. This is extremely, amazing opportunity. I'm so thankful for you. This is just, me spitballing here, but, really starting off of intentionally saying, hey, I want to acknowledge you, and then go from there. And that alone, and slowing it down could really start to, shift people, making them feel a lot different in a different way. Some people need more of that coddling or recognition and everything, but everyone always appreciates it. You can't go wrong when you're starting off that way with someone, with the conversation. And even if it's a situation where you're behind on revenue sales, or you're behind on something, come in and acknowledge them and the work that they're doing, or your team or that individual, and then go into and pause and wait and see what they have to say. So just really being authentic, and slowing down, and more thoughtful around the acknowledgement with the individual could really start to create more of an impact for your organization.
Yeah. It was intriguing in the answer you just gave. As a Sandler trained consultant and salesperson, like, there's so many little Sandler mechanisms in what you just said, with like matching and mirroring, and slowing down, and wait to see what they say. The pause in between. It is been an enlightening experience to see how, in my construction days and in my early days as a salesperson, what was sales tactics to get to particular outcomes have really just become like good human behavior, like gratitude or empathy. And so I've never heard it in an executive coaching conversation like this before, and I'm just connecting dots over here from
Awesome.
my experiences. Can you, you said sometimes gratitude and empathy are just seen as soft skills. Can you provide us some clarity on, like, yes, those are soft skills. That's a documented thing. But when you're using them in this framework, what is different than just good human behavior from a gratitude and empathy perspective?
It's a great question. There's a certain power of truly believing and using it in your daily life, of approaching something from love, from gratitude, from empathy, that a lot of people miss out on. And when you're really living it and breathing it, and holding yourselves to the highest accountability and highest standards for yourself at home first, that will start to bring it into your professional and your organization. When you can start with yourself, and it's all about who you're being. And, when I first started going through all of this, this whole being movement with my coach, Daryl, I was like, man, if he says being one more time, I'm going to freak out. But I truly understand it now, and it's becoming even more so. Like, I've invested, tens of thousands of dollars into myself and self-learning, and through this network of world-class coaches that I'm learning from, to where I'm excited to go to one of these coaching schools that I just started for the next 6 months, and over in London. And, it really is truly all about that, starting with yourself. And when you start to do that and implement it at home, not only does everything shift at home, and you don't even have to tell anyone that you're doing it. When you start being it and truly, diving into that, people start to notice, and they shift themselves. They're like, wow, he's like totally showing up different. And people look at you more so as a leader. And it's very important to know that when you start to realize that and understand it, it's 100% you, and that accountability. Like I use an extreme analogy. I might have shared this with you before, but with a lot of people I work with, if we're sitting here right now and an asteroid comes down and blows up, the house, and my arm gets blown off, I take responsibility. That's my fault for not being so aware. And I know that's an extreme analogy and stuff, but holding yourself to that accountability and who you're being and showing up each and every day, every single word that comes out of our mouth, it creates the environments that we're in. So like, if you truly want to see a shift, it's starting with yourself with those two things.
So I'm going to scale back into an active listening exercise here. I heard you say start at home, and that's where it basically gets branded on your DNA. So now you have authenticity wherever you're going with it. And I think the way I interpreted what your answer to the question was that like they are soft skills, but they're soft skills that create professional output because it sets you apart, or it just skills you up as a leader. And I hate using the word skill up because that sounds like tactical skills. But it is, it's something that allows you to be more effective with every lever in the organization that you're pulling, so whether that's revenue or culture or both or vision, being able to show up in a real way with that in yourself or in your being allows you to steer and direct and guide the organization the way that you're intending to.
100%. Like it starts to allow you to create extraordinary results, like almost miracles.
Do you have an example of that? Like, I particularly would prefer like a project level, like a smaller level of it. But anything you have where it's an example of like somebody changed the way that they show up in the world because they changed the way they show up to themselves, and then the measurable output that had in an organization over time.
Yeah. And trying to keep everything as confidential as possible. Like I had a client come to me. They're in a situation where it was stemming from work and how they were showing up at work, but was starting to seep into home life. And, as an individual, I've always looked up to as a leader, and never thought in a million years they would ever reach out to me for anything like this. But it's allowed them to really, save their marriage, save, how they're parenting, and also, got rid of and eliminated the fear of losing their job, of, what was going on there as well. I wish I could get more specific on that, but, to give you a little flavor of that, like, they were also, should I do medicine? Should I go see a counselor? All of this, and which are all, again, great avenues and sources, but that was uncomfortable for them. And they're like, where can I really begin? And so when they started implementing and beginning at home and shipping that, everything professional and the personal world started to get a lot better. And so, again, as a person, I never thought in a million years that would ever, reach out for something like this, but being vulnerable and sharing my story allows people to, and that's another reason I really love the work that I do, and starting to do more, because I've had my own executive coaches at, a startup where it's a total non-biased, non-judgmental third party where I know it's not going to get back to HR type of environment. You can have internal coaches, but are they going to report me to HR? It's just,
that's a good point.
One of those things that it creates such a trust and non-judgmental free zone for that individual to really open up and get out of their own way of, the fears that have overtaken and consumed them.
So it's continuing the narrative that this individual changed themselves because they wanted to. They had that willingness and desire to show up in a different way in their mind and show up in a different way in the space around them, that led to a better house and home, that then led to a better professional environment. And I'm assuming that also helped with their professional performance is what you were alluding to with that answer. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely. And, it's not me doing the work, it's them. And to your point, they are wanting the change. And, from my own personal experience, hindsight looking back, I had all the support in the world. At then, I didn't think I had any support, because you're just so clouded. Your mind's very powerful and can take over a lot of things. But, it was me really that came down to at the end of the day that truly wanted change. Like, how can I change this and wanted it? And I would literally do anything. There's not a price tag in the world for how I feel right now, especially with my heart condition I've had my whole entire life.
Right.
So, it's just a matter of, are you sick of being in default mode and have things been stagnant for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And what do I got to do to change it? And having a space like this with someone can help, you see it different perspectives and open up and see your blind spots that you're missing.
That makes sense. I know you work with teams too. So have you ever come into a situation where you had someone who wasn't wanting to change or willing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Most cases they come around, but you'll still have your people of, this isn't for me. This is just whatever. And that's the victim mindset. When you fully get out of that mindset and take full ownership of everything, that changes everything in itself. But it comes down to, you want to make that change and you want to stop being the victim. There's people I know that have been through things I can't even fathom, or 99% of the world couldn't even fathom going through anything like that. But they made the choice to stop being that and stop playing that victim card. And they're starting to create amazing things out there. I can't even describe this one situation that I know of, just how horrific and incredible how far this individual has come, especially raising, kids on their own, in their situation. It's just mind-boggling. But I strongly and truly believe everyone's fully capable of doing it. In this network that I'm part of, the coaches, there's this world-renowned doctor, Belvin's, I think his name, but he's worked with like psych ward patients and has cured them without medicine. He's a psychologist, but also a coach, and he's in his 80s and he's dedicated the next 25 years of his life to helping people. Just an incredible human being, but it's fascinating too, all at the same time, to where, again, if that person's and working with that individual, if you approach them with just love, they'll start to open up.
I want to ask this question in a way that's least offensive as possible, but a lot of the words you're using, a lot of people would say they're like frilly or frou-frou or whatever, probably other F word that is appropriate that they would say. And related to that, is that where you get your pushback sometimes from individuals that are less bought in?
Not really. I personally, exactly like you, before I even started down this really deep learning I've been doing, felt the exact same way. I'm like, oh, this is bullshit.
Right.
It's whatever. I don't need this. Like, that's silly, But the more I understand it and everything, like, it's been a lot more open arms than I anticipated it would be, just because of how I'm showing up and the things that I've been doing and working on. Those individuals have started to notice, and that's what really started to pique their interest more in the work that I'm doing and stuff too, just by me and who I'm showing up as each and every day.
Yeah, you're an example of game. Like, you're an example of your air quotes product. And so when you show up, even if they have those types of guards up or those types of perceptions, just because you are operating that way, you're starting to break those down and then letting them engage the framework and the process as well.
Right.
That's pretty golden. Do you remember when you first realized that was how it was happening?
I'd say the past 2 years, definitely, when I've been challenged by my own coach to take action and implement this and do it. I struggled with, um, prior to all of this, I'd say, 3 years ago and beyond, that with politics and how people, and not to get into all of that, but I really struggled with and just didn't understand and would get down these rabbit holes, with people. And when I look back at it, it's like, it's just, that's not a way of being. And when I started to shift me personally and how I respond to things, in the conversations I have around it all, people are like, "Oh, who's this Jesse?" Like, this isn't the
He's
Jesse
a
guy.
different person.
No.
Right.
But that's just one personal example. And even I love this question. And I'll ask you, what percentage of the time do you feel you're being your word?
Oh, that's a good one. I immediately thought you were going to say you're being yourself, but you're saying you're being, and when you say word, you're asking what percentage of time do you think that you are being who you want to be, basically, or who you say you are,
or the commitments that you make.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the commitments and you're being your word, whether it's committing to this meeting, or hey, I'm going to follow up with you. Like, what percentage of the time do you feel you execute on that?
Yeah. I mean, you can take that to a small task level all the way up to, like you were talking about earlier, parenting. I don't want to dodge the question. I feel like I need to spend a lot more time thinking about it to make a good, accurate and answer, but I can confidently say at least 75%, but that I would want to be over 90.
Right. And it's so funny because my answer was 70, 80% when I answered this. And I don't know off the top of my head the statistics, but on average, it's 20%. Every person is 20%. It's like, there's no way.
Like when you get down and you figure it out.
And then I started to, audit this. And I look back at it and I'm like, if you start to do every single thing in your life, if you've been asked to take out the trash, from your wife or your partner, or, asked to do this chore, or asked to send this email, or whatever it is, those little things start to add up. And I can be like, okay, that lowered my score a little bit there. And so, one thing I've really worked on and worked with my clients and with my coaches is being your word, BMW. And that's in that book too of Steve Hardison's. But really putting that into action and putting that into place. And again, that goes down to who you're being and being your word. And when you start to, do all of these things and pull all of these things together, and things just start to shift, and the game that we're playing just starts to astronomically get your ROI that you've always wanted.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking of, like, I feel like every, in general, but definitely professionally oriented self-help type book I've read in the past 5 to 10 years. So like, say no to more and yes to less. And if you are understanding that you're going to show up 99, 100% of the time as your word, then it's easier to say no, because you have to meet that commitment. And like, just how that all works together, and looking at the way that you have tied that into game through the whole process.
100%.
I want to ask the question, for someone who, whether it's professional or personal focus, for someone who like hears this because I talk about it or sees it on LinkedIn or whatever, and they say, man, I really need to get started with something like that. What do you recommend as the first step to start to basically break that default mode network in their neuro firings and get started into that deep work?
One, acknowledging it yourself, like, that's huge. Like, understanding and be like, I'm ready for this change. And I'd strongly, read The Ultimate Coach. Like, that's just a really, and I know everyone's book list is a million books tall. But that one alone will just start to get you in a different frame of mind. But yeah, really just acknowledging it and wanting to take action. Like what's that look like? How can I start to change this for myself?
That's good. So you just become aware and intentional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And everyone has good intentions, right? But it's the commitment to it.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, I'm like, I want to be an executive coach. I want to be an executive coach. And I just didn't know where to begin or start. And, I start reading books and I start doing this. And then, when I really looked down, it's like, how can I bring someone to even a deeper level and provide that value and ROI they're looking for if I'm not doing it myself? So that's when I started looking into coaches personally for myself. But that investment was significant. I'm like, man, I can't afford this. Like, there's no way right now. And that was my story all along. I can't afford this. I can't afford this. And, really to get started, to be transparent, on one of my vehicles I had paid off, I was trying to come up with the cash to pay my coach because he charges upfront annually for the entire year. And so, I went and got a lien out on my paid off vehicle to pay him. But my ROI on that, within 3 months, it was paid off. So, but what I realized, what it did for me, and it was never like he was like pinning me down, you have to do this, have to do this. We were set up every 2 weeks to, meet and coach with each other. But I'd want to show up every 2 weeks. And it held myself to accountability even at a much larger scale because I invested. Like, that was a large chunk of change I've invested in myself. And I wanted to make the most of it. So it allowed me to take a lot more action, each and every day, as opposed to just, I'll get to it, I'll get around to it. And then a year or 2 years or 3 years goes by. It's every 2 weeks, something incredible. Because I want to show up and be like, dude, listen, this is what I've been working on.
Yeah.
Check this out. And he's like, man, that's incredible. And then he would challenge me and be open to it. It's not that I have to do it, or sign me, but it's always like, would you be open to, this challenge or to this homework assignment for the next 2 weeks or a month, or when you want to put a deadline on it, and start to get creative with each other to where the results that you start to see for yourself, that you're creating for yourself. Daryl isn't doing it for me. Ankush isn't doing it for me. It's just, it challenges yourself and holds yourself at much higher standards when you're committed to it. So it's not just intentionally doing something, but it's fully committing to it.
Yeah, I hear you. We would normally wrap up our conversation with a tech tip. So I'm just going to say right now, the tech tip of the day is to read The Ultimate Coach. And we're going to bypass that because I want to ask another question or two with the time that we have. The first one is, and this might be a tech tip in and of itself, to be clear, but you've talked about auditing your percentage to figure out it was 20% and from when you're showing up as your word. And you've talked about looking at the data points of how your emotional optimism or pessimism was fluctuating over time. And that sounds really overwhelming. And for someone who's already juggling a 9 to 14 hour workday and running kids to sports and showing up for their partner. I know that executives have a really hard time making time for things because it's the most limited and finite resource that we have. What would you say to someone that was like, I just don't have time for this?
Time for tracking that or time for coaching?
Time for, sometimes tracking it, but for time to start to do the work. Like I can tell that you spend time looking into what your behaviors are doing, what the reality of your situation is, and then you're recalibrating your internal ecosystem based off of the results you're seeing in a very almost data-oriented approach. And I know we're talking about emotional work, but I know people that I rub elbows with all the time that would just say, oh, that sounds like 4 hours a week I don't have.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's funny because I would say for 18 years of the first 18 years of tracking, right? Had I known that this way of being was available to me at all times, like now,
Mm-hmm.
then I would have saved 18 years of those ups and downs and peaks and valleys of my life. Like I've condensed those 18 years down to, I don't have to worry about tracking it, even though I still do because I'm curious and I've done it for so long. I don't have to worry about doing that because I know who I'm being each and every day. And so that alone, slowing down for especially the first year of coaching with my coach Daryl, slowing everything down and really establishing who I'm being, who I'm showing up with each and every day, and continuing to improve that way of being moving forward, which I've now done, consecutively for the past 2.5 years, has astronomically sped up so many more things and aspects in my life. And it's not time at all being taken away, or, I'm involved with many things right now. And people are like, oh, how do you have the time to do all of this stuff? And I feel I have more free time than I've ever had in my life. And I'm doing, 3 times more than what I used to be doing. So it's really going back to that sort of, slowing down to speed up type of way of being. But like when you truly start to figure out and, hone in on, again, I'm going to sound like my coach, being, that's where the real true, hockey stick curve comes into play, because it's not a matter of questioning of, oh, I don't have time to do this anymore, because you're doing it, you're being it and living it.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. So that's, game is creating a better life for people, and thus creating better output for them, but also creating a I should change that. Also expanding their bucket of time.
Yeah.
Because they are able to operate more efficiently in little ways, be more intentional with what they're saying yes to, like all these little things we've talked about today. And I'm sure we've just touched the surface of that bucket. So yeah, that is really great.
Yeah. I'd also, check out, my coach is Daryl Sweeney. He's based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And he has his weekly videos of bending time with Daryl. It's great. I love what he's created there, but the work he's doing, what he's creating, is really awesome too. But yeah, it's literally bending time and creating more time. And it's for the people who love systems and processes. It's literally creating system and processes for all aspects of life. And it's not what you think of, like, oh, pen and paper. I got to do this, execute. Like, it's literally self systems and processes that get you to where you want to be and get you way more into this creative mindset and creative mode.
Oh, I'm glad you said creative, because it does sound, systems and processes usually sounds like the opposite of creative. And you're saying it's the foundation of creativity. Jesse's game framework reveals something powerful. The attributes that drive lasting success aren't found in business school textbooks, but in how we show up as human beings every day. The key takeaways today were gratitude, attitude, mindset, and empathy aren't just nice to haves. They're the actual operating system that determines whether teams thrive or merely survive. The organizations that embrace all 4 elements don't just perform better, they create environments where people genuinely want to contribute their best work. Learn more about Jesse at nextlevelguidance.com.